morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Welcome back. We're in now the Parsha of Shemos. This Sikha was said on the 23rd of Teves. Today is the 23rd, so it's today, in 1986. 1986. So this was Shabbos Mevarchim, and this coming Shabbos, of course, is also Shabbos Mevarchim.
Amen.
When we are going to bless the new month of Shvat. We're going to talk a little bit about Shvat and the significance of Shvat in a moment. So the Rebbe says that every Shabbos Mevarchim has a quality of bestowing general blessings on the coming month. That's why we make a blessing on the new moon, on the coming month, and on Shabbos and the services, and we bless it for Chaim, for wealth, for life, and for goodness and happiness and everything, as well as blessings for the unique characteristics and aspects of the respective month that we're in. When we gather for Farbrengen, a gathering on the Shabbos Mevarchim, we enhance the effusion of blessings. And we always make more blessings because we're blessing the new month. It's a month. It's a Shabbos of blessings. The Farbrengen intensifies its blessings of God to the Jewish people. It also focuses on the blessings of God on areas of Torah and divine service, leading to renewed resolve on the part of the community that the next month should be enhanced, should be more. We should increase our Torah study. We should increase our mitzvahs, increase our deeds of kindness for the future as well. Jewish people believe in going Michael l'Chayel, from strength to strength, increasing and moving all the time. So the blessings of God on all the assembled in all their needs is enhanced this Shabbos. The blessings will be seen and felt in the success of this Farbrengen itself. Okay, so the Rebbe asks, what is the special theme of the month of Shvat? So he says in Devarim, chapter 1, verses 3 through 5, it says as follows. On the first of the 11th month, the first day of the 11th month, which would be Shvat, counting from Nisan, counting the months from Nisan, would be the 11th month is Shvat. In the 40th year, that would be the 40th year of their going out of Egypt. So they were in the desert for 40 years, and they're about to enter the land of Israel. The Torah says Moshe began to explain the law on the east bank of the Jordan in the land of Moab, because we know that Moshe was not allowed to go into Eretz Yisrael. So this was said on the east bank before the Jewish people were to cross the Jordan and enter into the Holy Land. So again, it says on the first day of the 11th month, on the 40th year, Moshe began to explain the law on the east bank of Jordan in the land of Egypt, no, in the land of Moab, which would be around Jordan today. Rashi adds an important point to this. He says, in the 70 languages of the ancient world did he explain it to them. The number 70 languages is significant for several reasons. First of all, we know that a Sanhedrin was composed of about 70 members, 72 members, different disagreements about that. But each member of the Sanhedrin needed to know all 70 languages. And we are told that there are 70 languages. 70 languages. Now maybe there are many more than that, but they can be all divided up into approximately 70 groups of languages. So Moshe was told to explain the law to the Jewish people, and he should do it not just in Hebrew, or the language that they're familiar with, but in all 70 languages. So the Rebbe says from here we see that the predominant theme of Shvat is to teach and disseminate Torah and Yiddishkeit every day, in every place, and under every circumstance. This means reaching out to Jews who are far away from Torah, to the point that the Torah must be translated for them into their mother tongues, the 70 languages. Very often when it refers to the 70 languages, it talks about the non-Jewish world. as the non-Jewish world speaks throughout the 70 languages. So the important thing was that Moshe was supposed to teach them the Torah in any language that they spoke of the 70 languages. And this is also a hint, a remiss, to the idea of teaching to the non-Jews as well, reaching out to the non-Jews, to teach them about the 7 mitzvahs of Noah, according to the Rambam, according to in the book in the Laws of Kings, Sefer, the Laws of Kings in the Rambam. So we have a responsibility not just to teach Torah to our own in Hebrew, but to do it in many languages. I'm reminded, it's an interesting thing that in the 1700s, 1800s, the governments of Russia, Poland, and many of the European countries throughout the Austro-Hungarian Empire wanted to assimilate the Jews. They wanted to first of all, to convert them to Christianity and to assimilate them, because they felt that Judaism was a rogue religion. And the best way to do it, they felt, was to teach them secular studies, enroll them in their public schools, and to teach them the languages of Europe, Russian, Polish, these various languages, Ukrainian, various languages. By teaching them these languages, they would come along and read non-Jewish books, and eventually read the New Testament, I suppose, the Christian Bible, and eventually they would convert. And many Jews, especially the members of the Enlightenment, went along with it, thought it was a great idea. They thought it was a way of getting rid of anti-Semitism. And even many Orthodox Jews thought it was a good idea as well. Among them was the famous personality, Moses Mendelssohn, who lived in Germany in the 1800s. And Mendelssohn, one of his big claims to fame was translating the Bible into German, because the German Jews did not really understand Hebrew so well. They were quite assimilated. And he felt that by translating the Bible into German, they would be able to read the Bible. He was an Orthodox Jew himself, and he wanted to teach Bible to Jews, and this is the best way to do it. Well, today, we would look at that and say, what a great idea. After all, take a look at all the books today, all the holy books that we have that are also translated not only into English, but in every language. So many of the publishing houses, whether it's Art Scroll or Kahus or Feldheim or any of the other Jewish publishing houses, all publish in translated versions of the Bible, the Talmud, Midrashim, you name it. And it's a very common thing. In fact, these are their biggest sellers. So what was the problem there? So what happened was that the rabbis of the time, led by probably Rabbi Moshe Sofer, the Chassam Sofer, who lived in Pressburg, which is now Bratislava, in Czechoslovakia, or the Slovak Republic. The Chassam Sofer, who was one of the leaders of the Jewish people at the time, was very much opposed to this. He was very much against translating any of these texts into the vernacular, very much opposed to it. And he fought hard against it, because he thought that this would cause assimilation, and he was very much against it. I'm wondering if the Chassam Sofer lived today, what would he think today about all the translations? Well, I think he would approve, because it's a different time we're living in now. And the Jewish people, for one thing, are very assimilated, and they speak primarily the languages in which they live, and they are not so versed in classical Jewish text in the original. So this is a wonderful way. How many people are learning Daf Yomi because it's available in English? How many people are going through the Midrashim or the Rebbe Sichos in English because they can read it now in their own language, they can understand it. But in those days, in the late 1700s, early 1800s, the rabbis at the time were very, very much opposed to it. So here, Rashi says that Moshe is to teach the Torah in the 70 languages, not just in Hebrew. So that's a very odd thing. So he says here that we see that the predominant theme of Shvat is to teach and disseminate Torah and Judaism every day in every place and under every circumstance. That's the primary theme of the month. This means reaching out to Jews who are far away from Torah to the point that the Torah must be translated for them into their mother tongues, the 70 languages. So he continues, this would also include outreach to our non-Jewish neighbors in the manner described in by the Rambam, as he says, to compel all human beings to accept the commandments enjoined upon the descendants of Noah. Now, there's the 7 commandments of Noah: don't kill, don't steal, don't commit adultery, believe in one God, not to curse God, not to tear a limb from a living animal, establish systems of justice in the world. The 7 basic laws of Noah. And our job is not only to teach Jews Torah, but to teach the non-Jews the 7 laws of Noah, the 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noah. They too must be encouraged and motivated by logic and reason in their mother tongues. It should be taught to them in their mother tongues to accept the aspects of Torah pertinent to them. Now, a number of years ago, the Rebbe came out with a campaign, his campaign of Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei Noah, the 7 laws of Noah, that we should reach out to non-Jews and teach them the 7 basic Noahic laws. We shouldn't go out and proselytize to convert them, but we should encourage them to observe the 7 laws of Noah. And I don't know if I've spoken about this before, but the Jewish Orthodox world was quite aghast at this idea. First time ever since biblical times that Jews were told by leaders of the Jewish people, like the Rabbi, to go out and to reach out to non-Jews. This is an unbelievable thing. And the followers of the Rebbe did so fervently, with a passion. They would print little cards, Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei Noach cards, with the explanation of what they are, and they would pass them out and speak to them. And now, instead of just talking to Jews and say, "Excuse me, sir, are you Jewish?" and then encouraging them to put on tefillin or light Shabbos candles, they would, some would say, "No, I'm sorry, I'm not Jewish." And they would say, "Oh, okay, here, take a card, please. Take a card, read the card." And they would encourage people to do that. In fact, even in Israel, the followers of Chabad in Israel would reach out to Arabs and encourage them to observe the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei Noach as well, and certainly they should. They need it very badly over there as well. And this became a campaign. Books were written about it. Exactly, what are the Sheva Mitzvahs? How do we observe them? How do we encourage a non-Jew to observe them? What laws are involved in them, etc., etc. Communities were established to reach out to these people and to teach them the Sheva Mitzvahs. And these were many non-Jews who were disillusioned with the established religions of the time, Christianity, Islam, etc. And they were drawn to these Sheva Mitzvahs communities, which they joined. And a rabbi would come in once a week or once a month and teach them what these laws are and how they are appropriate to them. And they called themselves Noachites. Noachites. They were not Jews. They did not convert. So maybe some of them did, but most of them did not convert. But they observed the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei Noach, and they learned about them. So he says here that the ancient theme of Shvat, starting from Rosh Chodesh, is an opportune time for teaching and speaking Torah in Yiddishkeit will also find special emphasis in our generation when the 10th of Shvat took on new significance. What was the 10th of Shvat? The 10th of Shvat is the Yortzeit, or the Hilula, the day of the passing of the previous Lubavitch Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson of blessed memory, who was the leader of our generation, and as it's explained in Tanya in Igeres HaKodesh, all his doings, his Torah, and the divine service which he served all the days of his life became revealed and radiate in a manifest way from above down below at the time of his passing. This talks about when a tzaddik leaves the world and affect salvation in the midst of the earth. So when a tzaddik passes away, it leaves a great impression on the world, and it brings a tremendous level of salvation to the entire world. It's a very significant day. The Shabbos, on which we bless the month, provides us with the special powers relating to the theme of the 10th of Shvat, and empowers and invigorates us to assume the necessary resolutions needed to follow in the path of the previous Rebbe. This will especially include the work of spreading Torah and Chassidus and disseminating the well springs to the outside. It must be said that it was on the 10th of Shvat in 1950, Tafshin Yud, that the previous Rebbe passed away at the age of 60. And it was on that same day, 1 year later, that the Rebbe, our Rebbe, took over the mantle of leadership of the Chabad movement and started a movement of spreading Torah and Judaism and mitzvahs to the entire world as never before, in a movement that became a historical movement, that is the Chabad movement today. It started on Yud Shvat of the following year, although the Hasidim would say that it started actually when the previous Rebbe passed away, even though the Rebbe did not accept leadership at that point, but people knew that he was destined to be his successor. The Shabbos in which we bless the month provides us with the special powers relating to the theme of the 10th of Shvat, and empowers and invigorates us to assume the necessary resolutions needed to follow in the path of the previous Lubavitch Rebbe. The theme of Shvat, which begins on Rosh Chodesh, is related to us in the written Torah, as we mentioned before, and it comes at the start of the month. On the other hand, in other words, when the month of Shvat starts, the powers of Shvat begin. On the other hand, the theme of the 10th of Shvat is new to this generation. It was before our generation, before the previous Rebbe passed away on the 10th of Shvat. The 10th of Shvat was not considered an auspicious day, a special day. Despite this, we must place greater emphasis and harder work on the aspects of divine service introduced by the 10th of Shvat. We must arouse enthusiasm in the areas which relate to us and to our times. So certainly before the previous Rebbe passed away, no one knew from the 10th of Shvat, but now we do. And now we know the significance of the 10th of Shvat and the meaning of it for our days today. He says the translators and commentators on the meaning of prayer ask why in our liturgy we say our God before God of our Father. We say Elokeinu v'Elokei Avosenu. Why? It should be first our God, and then afterwards it should say the God of our fathers. First it should say the God of our fathers, and then once we have the God of our fathers, we've accepted the God of our fathers, then it should say our God. But this is the opposite. It says Elokeinu, our God first, and then the God of our fathers. Elokei Abraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. This is in the Shemona Esrei. Reason would seem to dictate the reverse order, as he says, and he explains that I just explained. The truth, however, is that the immediacy and intimacy of our prayer requires us first to acknowledge and declare our faith by saying our God. First, we need to say our God. We need to accept God first. Having made that declaration and having evoked the proper intention in our prayers, we may then evoke the memory of our forefathers. First, the Jew needs to come to God himself or herself. First, we need to come to God to ourselves. Once we come to God to ourselves, then we can connect to the God of our fathers. Because we care about our faith in God, and it is vital to us, it will affect more kavanah, more intention and concentration and feeling in our prayers by accepting God upon ourselves. We will work harder, and consequently our prayers will be more efficacious. This is the power of the human spirit. First, we need to accept God upon us as our God, and then everything comes after that. So getting back to the previous Lubavitch Rebbe, The previous Rebbe said in the name of his grandfather, the Rebbe Marash, Rebbe Shmuel of Lubavitch, he once explained this indomitable human power in relation to Talmudic discussion concerning the hair-splitting arguments and counter-arguments which might arise in cases where women are the principals and litigants, including even the protestations of an ignorant, illiterate, non-Jewish slave girl. So sometimes we accept the testimony of women and the values of women, which are very, very important to us. The Tanaim and Amarayim, the rabbis of the Talmud, debate all the fine points of what these women might argue. The question arises, the sages of the Talmud had reached the highest level of human intellect and had toiled day and night in the study of Torah to the point of self-abnegation, so much so that the Torah is attributed to them. The Torah is attributed to them. Now, is it possible that the ignorant slave girl will think of any of these lofty and brilliant ideas or points? What's the rationale? Why does the Torah very often speak to women and talk about mitzvahs for women and obligations of women? The answer is that when something is truly important, when your life or pride or money is on the line and you really care, then even the illiterate slave girl will come up with ingenious logic and arguments way beyond her normal mental ability. So women certainly have the ability of studying Torah and coming up with novel new ideas in Torah study as well. They should not be discounted. In more recent times, the Rebbe even encouraged women to study Talmud, those aspects of Talmud which are appropriate to them, which are many: laws of Shabbos, laws of kosher, laws of Taras Mishpacha, family purity, so many of the laws, how to raise children. So many of these things are appropriate for women. In fact, today, more and more women are serving as teachers of the laws of family purity to other women, because many women are uncomfortable learning these things from the men. They're very personal, very intimate things that they have to learn about. So most Rebbitzins today are quite versed in the laws of Taras Mishpacha, family purity, and they are expert in that. In fact, I dare say my own wife, Sarah, is probably the top expert in San Diego of the laws of family purity. I don't think any rabbi in San Diego knows as much as she does about the laws of Taras Mishpacha. It's incredible what she knows about it. She's been studying it and teaching it for 45 years. So some of the rabbis here are not even 45 years old. So it's an amazing thing. People come to her for advice. If there's a shaila, if there's a question, she generally does not answer questions. She'll recommend you go to a rav. But to teach the halachas to brides and to give refresher courses to women is something that women can do, should do, and are doing throughout the Jewish world today. And they are truly expert in it. After all, they're familiar with the laws because they're familiar with their body, and they know how things work, and they know what things, how things go in terms of halacha in this regard. He says here, therefore, when we have a choice of giving precedence to a matter which we inherited from our forefathers, the teachings of the month of Shvat, or to a theme introduced more recently in our own generation, it makes sense to emphasize the enthusiasm in the newer matter, for it is closer to us and we can find it more strongly. This is the theme of the Hilula of the 10th of Shvat. So the 10th of Shvat is something which is new, unique, and therefore, even though the month of Shvat in general is a month of studying Torah and teaching Torah, but the ideas of the 10th of Shvat actually in many respects take precedence over the general ideas of the month itself. Starting out with this theme in our divine service, we can then undertake all the previous commitments in a more enhanced way. By enhancing the meaning of the 10th of Shvat, the entire month of Shvat becomes more meaningful to us. It becomes greater to us. Let's therefore evaluate and appreciate the preciousness of every moment of this month, Shvat, the month of Shvat, and make the proper resolutions and efforts to utilize every moment properly. So the Rebbe says, may you see success in spreading the blessings of Shabbos Avarchim to all Israel and to each of you individually, and to increase in all matters connected with the 10th of Shvat, spreading the fountains of Torah to the outside, and re-emphasizing the previous Rebbe's urgent call, immediate repentance, immediate redemption. As it says, spreading the fountains of Chassidus will bring the King Mashiach and the true and complete redemption speedily and truly in our times. We continue. Being that we read the portion of Shmos, we read the portion of Shmos this year on Shabbos Avarchim, Shvat, we should seek the special connection between the two. This may be expressed both by the subject matter of the portion and also by its name, Shmos. The context of the portion is the period and experience of the Egyptian exile, the Egyptian bondage. Back in the book of Bereshis, we read how the fledgling Jewish nation descended to Egypt, but the true gullus and servitude began after Yosef and his generation passed away. That's when it all happened, which is related to us in the book of Shmos. Thus, the beginning of Shmos begins with the story of the exile. We are told how it happened, that the Jewish people came to Egypt, and how and when the servitude began. So we're told that the king of Egypt, Paro, came anew. It says, V'yakom melech chadash, a new king arose that did not know Yosef, and the rabbis disagree about what this means. Some say, same king, new decrees. Others say, new king, the old king died, and a new king came along who had these new decrees. He did not remember Yosef and what Yosef did for Egypt. In fact, we can appreciate that today with what's happening in Washington and all of the difficulties going on in our government today, which is so sad and so tragic. And we wonder what's going on. Where's our leadership today? What's happening? Why things were going so good, things were going so well, and then all of a sudden things took a tremendous turn for the worst. V'yakom melech chadash, a new king arose. Who is this new king? Was it the same one or a new one? But things are happening, things are changing, and we really don't know what the future will be, but we offer our condolences to those families that have been affected by this negatively, and we hope and pray that those people who are upset, who are angry, should calm down, and that the rule of law should apply, no matter what. The rule of law should apply. We are a country of law, and we pride ourselves in that. Dinah, the Malchus Dinah, the laws of the land are indeed the law, and we should turn to our courts and to our legal system to solve our problems, to decide who gets elected and who doesn't, and how we should act as a result of that. And perhaps this is in keeping with the theme of the month of Shvat. The month of Shvat is the month of Torah. Torah is connected with justice and laws and righteousness, and it's in the month of Shvat that Moshe taught the Jewish people Torah, and therefore the Jewish people and the people of the world in general should be governed by law, not by the rule of the mob and things like that. Very sad what's going on today. We hope and pray that things should improve. We are told that the Egyptians started to make the Israelites do labor, designated to break their bodies, and that Paro decreed inhumane, insidious injunction that it says every boy who is born must be cast into the sea, into the Nile rather. Thus we are taken through the story of slavery until at the close of this week's portion we see how the Jewish people reached the worst state of slavery. It says, do not give the people straw for bricks as before. Let them go out and gather their own straw. Meanwhile, you must require them to make the same quota of bricks as before. Do not reduce it. You shall not give them any straw, and you must deliver your quota of bricks. So it became, before the end came, before it finished, it became worse. It became worse than ever. And maybe these are the times that we're living in today as well, that it's become very bad, that people are suffering terribly, that people have no food to eat, that businesses are closing, and children are going hungry in the streets. And things are bad. Things are very bad. But perhaps it needs to come to its lowest level before it'll become better. Following this, the Torah goes on to tell us, Moshe returned to God and said, O Lord, why do you mistreat your people? Why did you send me? As soon as I came to Paro to speak in your name, he made things worse for the people. You have done nothing to help your people, Moshe said to God. Moshe was very disheartened and despondent through these words. And it seemed that we were going downhill quickly, as they say. Things seemed very, very bad. Not only was there no easement as a result of Moshe's confrontation with Paro, it became even worse. It became even worse. And Moshe, whose essence was truth, made the statement, it was actually so. The last verse of the portion does seem to hold hope, however. As it says at the end of the parsha, now you will begin to see what I will do to Paro, God says. He will be forced to let them go. Again, God is talking to Moshe from the midst of the burning bush. But he will be forced to drive them out of the land. So God is giving Moshe hope that through Moshe's intervention, God's intervention, things will get better until eventually things will get very good, better than ever before. We will be led out of Egypt. We will go to Mount Sinai, receive the Torah, learn the Torah for 40 years, and then we will proceed to Eretz Yisrael and claim our inheritance, our rightful inheritance with the land of Israel. And this is will all start with the blessing that God gave to Moshe, that he will be successful to do that. The Rebbe says, so the entire portion deals with exile and slavery. In Vayera, the redemption begins, and Paro begins to get his punishment, but in Shemos, only trouble and exile. It's interesting that the name of the book in Hebrew is Shemos, meaning names. In English, it's taken from the Septuagint, the Greek, which is Exodus. And Exodus means to go out, Yetziah, to go out. So really the theme, the names of the books in Greek were taken from the Septuagint, or the Maisa Hashivim, the story of the 70, where the story was that King Ptolemy sent 70 rabbis into 70 different rooms to translate the Torah into 70 languages, into Greek rather. And they came back, and they all remarkably had the same translation, which was an amazing thing. This is considered a miracle. Today we say that if you put 70 rabbis in 70 different rooms and they came out with the same translation, that would be a miracle. But in those days, 70 70 different languages, 70 different ways of coming up with it was quite remarkable. So the name Exodus means the going out of Egypt. It refers, and it's significant, even though it's not the Hebrew name, but it's the English name coming from the Greek. So it is significant that it has to do with the theme of Exodus. The theme of Shmos is going out of Egypt. So the entire portion deals with exile and slavery. But it also deals with redemption. Now, if the context and theme of this portion is slavery and exile, why call it Shemos? Names. In Hebrew, we say it's names, Shemos. What relationship do names have with Golus, with exile? It would seem to me that the name better should be Exodus, not Shemos. Furthermore, the Midrash says, now these are the names of the sons of Israel. These are mentioned here on account of the pending redemption of Israel. It says in Shemos Rabbah. Because we are about to leave Egypt, and we are going to leave Egypt with our Jewish names, not with our Egyptian names, secular names, but we are going to leave Egypt as Jews. Moreover, that's interesting, by the way, when Mashiach comes, Mashiach will call each one of us and call us by name. And he'll say, you, and you, and you, and you. And what name will he call us by? Not our English name. He'll call us by our Hebrew names. He'll call Moshe, and Yaakov, and Zipporah, and Yoshua, and Hannah. Mashiach will call us by our Hebrew names, so we should know what our Hebrew names are. Moreover, we find that the Jewish names was a reason for the redemption. As it says in the Midrash, Israel was redeemed from Egypt because they did not change their names, etc., having gone down as Reuben and Shimon, and having come up as Reuben and Shimon. They went into Egypt with their Hebrew names, and they came out with their Hebrew names. Does it make sense that the portion which deals solely with exile and suffering should be called Shemos, which connotes redemption? The answer, in a nutshell, is that the term names in its external application may actually be related to exile and not redemption. Only when we dig down and reveal its esoteric and essential facet will we find redemption. So we find an interesting connection between our names and the level of Jewish commitment or connection to Judaism that we have. I once had a professor of Jewish studies at Yeshiva University who said that you can tell the level of Jewishness of a person by their name or by the names they gave their children. For example, he says that the most religious of the Jews, the most connected to Judaism, will give their children names which are biblical names, very strong Jewish names. Shmuel, Yehuda, Moshe, Tzvi, etc., like that. But then, if people are a little bit more modern, a little bit more assimilated, they're more anglicized, they'll give their kids the same, but they're still connected to Judaism, they'll give their kids names which are still very Jewish. They're biblical names, but they're anglicized. For example, Yonasan becomes Jonathan. Moshe becomes Mark or Michael. Shmuel becomes Samuel, etc. Hannah becomes Anna. But they're people who are still connected. You know, you meet a Samuel or a Jonathan or a David, and you know many times they're Jewish. Maybe not always, but very often they're Jewish. But then came a generation that gave their children completely non-Jewish names. Completely. They didn't want any stigma attached at all to Jewishness. So they gave their kids names like Robert, Mark, Henry, names, just regular names, Howard, Albert, and these are very non-Jewish names. And this way they would not be differentiated between their non-Jewish friends. And then became a community of people that were so assimilated that they gave their children really Gentile names, not just a regular part of a Gentile name, but a real Gentile name, like Old English names, like Irving and Seymour and Marvin and Harry, right? And William. And you wonder, wait a minute, I thought those are very Jewish names. Whoever heard of a non-Jew called Irving? Whoever heard of a non-Jew called Seymour? These are Jewish names. Well, how did that come about? So the answer he gave was, if you have 1 million Jews who all gave their kids a real Gentile name, like Irving, Irving becomes a Jewish name. So it backfired on them. It backfired on them. So we can tell very often the level of commitment of people by their Jewish names, by the nature of their Jewish names, their biblical names. You even find by non-Jews who have names that are biblical names. Granted, they are more anglicized, but very often you meet a non-Jew who gave his children the name Judah and David and Joshua and things like that. And you know they're not Jewish, but you can tell they're probably a Christian. They're probably connected to the Bible in some way. By Muslims, if they give their child a name like Abraham, Muhammad, which is a derivative of Moses, Abdullah. These are names that are found in the Quran, and they show the commitment, the level of commitment of Muslims to their faith. And in fact, I would say more Muslims today give their kids truly religious Muslim names than Jews give their kids truly Jewish names. Think about that. But names are certainly a very, very important part of how we connect to our heritage. And in fact, probably rabbis today are asked more questions about names than anything else. You know, my father passed away. Someone already has his name. Can I give him also a name? And many, many different questions like that. However, on the other hand, a person's name is connected to his inner essence and being. Like we said, Mashiach calls you by your Hebrew name. In heaven, you're called by your Hebrew name. On your gravestone, they put your Hebrew name. If they put an English name on, they always put a Hebrew name on a gravestone. You always hear that. Chassidus explains that the letters of a person's name carry the code and create the conduit for the godly life force to radiate and flow into his body. In addition to this, when you call someone a name, you awaken the inner soul. For example, when you call a name, hey, Henry, Henry immediately turns and acknowledges the person that called him that name. Immediately, because his essence is Henry. That's who he is, or in Hebrew, Chaim, or whatever it may be. The problem comes up when you have a community like the Chabad community where everybody's called Mendel, and someone calls, hey, Mendel. Which Mendel is he talking about? But the Mendel that he's referring to, the essence of his name is the essence of his soul. That's how his soul is known in heaven, by his Hebrew name, not by his English name. In addition to this, when you call someone's name, you awaken the inner soul. When someone is in a state of faintness, and for example, if he's about to die, and his external powers are not functioning, it's a good idea to call his name. In fact, that's what you're supposed to do when someone faints or someone just dies. You call out their name in the hope that it'll awaken their spirit and their soul and wake them up. That's what you're supposed to do. I've done that, unfortunately, on many occasions with people. This will jar his essential life force and generate new energy from his soul to his body and his senses, and he can wake up by calling a person his name. A person responds to their name. This aspect of the name points to the facet of revelation, for it reveals his inner soul. The most apparent aspect and characteristic of a name is the fact that it does not reveal the nature of the person to the point that many different people may be called by the same name. Their differences are immediately apparent. The common factor relative to the common name might completely elude us. One would have to be an accomplished seer to actually evaluate the common factor. So when people would come to the Rebbe, they would ask the Rebbe for a bracha. He always asked them, "What is your Hebrew name?" They would say their Hebrew name. Then he would say, "What's your mother's name or your father's name?" And they would give over usually their mother's name. And sometimes it happened, very oddly, that the Rebbe would say, "That's not your father's name, or that's not your mother's name." How did the Rebbe know that? And the person would say, "Well, that's what I thought." The Rebbe would say, "Go back to call your father, call your mother, ask them, what is their Hebrew name?" And they would say, "Well, okay." They would go and they would ask their mother, their father. And sometimes the father would say, "Well, my name is really Yerachmiel, but I hated that name. So I started using the name Tzvi or David or something like that." But his real name was Yerachmiel. That's what his real name was. So it was amazing that the Rebbe could sense that someone was not telling him the right name. And why is that important? Because as we said here, the spiritual powers come into a person through their name, through the power of their name. Many years ago, Chabad used to print buttons that you would put onto your coat, and it would say, "I am proud of my Jewish name." And inside there was a little window, and the kid was supposed to write what their Jewish name was. And people were walking around with these buttons that were attached to their coat or their shirt, saying, "I am proud of my Jewish name." And indeed, we should be proud of our Jewish name, and we should give our children Jewish names, and we should call them by those names, so that they should know, that is my name. My name is Yehuda. That's my name, not John. My name is Hannah, not Anna. My name is Miriam, not Maria. That's my name. I'm a Maria. I'm a Miriam, rather. Because the name is a very precious, very special, very holy name. And the second aspect of the character of names is a bit more unclear. Only through learning Hasidic philosophy can we actually understand the relationship of the name with the soul and the inner life force. So you should find out what's your name and ask your local rabbi, what is the significance of my name? My name is Moshe. Moshe comes from the word Minamayim Shisuha. He was drawn from the water, referring to Moses, whose name was Moshe, and he was brought out of the water by Pharaoh's daughter and given that name, Moshe, and so on and so forth. The Jewish people are called by the name of Israel, and Yisrael is a common Hebrew name. It's the name of the state of Israel as well. The name Israel is a significant name as well. There are many different reasons, many different reasons for it, and you should find out what is the significance of your name. When we find out what our names are and we give our children a name, they should be proud of their Jewish name, and they should use their Jewish name. I know whenever we would go to the doctor's office with my kids when they were younger, they would say, "Okay, next, Reuven Leider." Reuven? What's Reuven? Yeah, the nurses would always say, "What a beautiful name. What does it mean?" I can't tell you how many times I heard that. What a beautiful name. Shana. What a beautiful name. What does it mean? It means beautiful. What a beautiful name. And so on. So we should give our children those names. They should go by those names. And because Hashem himself, God himself, listens to these names and calls us by those names. I want to wish everyone a good week. Everyone should read the parsha and take a look at the remarkable parsha that we have this week, story of the burning bush and Moshe going to Paro, and I think you'll really enjoy that. Shabbat Shalom.